The global economic landscape is shifting in ways we haven't seen in decades, with new alliances and strategies emerging on the world stage. At the heart of this transformation are the BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. 5 countries spanning 4 continents, each with unique strengths and ambitions. These countries have grown into major players, not just in their regions, but globally, and they are now seeking to reshape the very foundations of international finance. For decades, the US dollar has been the backbone of global trade and reserves, granting the United States immense leverage over the world's financial system and giving it a unique position of power. But now, BRICS is actively working to reduce this reliance on the dollar, a process known as de-dollarization, which is gaining momentum year after year. De-dollarization means using the US dollar less in international trade, central bank reserves, and cross-border investments, and instead, turning to their own national currencies or new alternatives. The dollar's dominance, established after World War II through agreements like Bretton Woods, has allowed the US to influence global markets, dictate lending terms, and even shape international politics. BRICS nations argue that this system is fundamentally imbalanced, leaving them exposed to US policy decisions, sudden sanctions, and financial instability beyond their control. For Russia and China, de-dollarization is a direct response to rising geopolitical tensions, trade wars, and the threat of Western sanctions that can freeze assets or disrupt economies overnight. For India, Brazil, and South Africa, the push is about achieving greater economic sovereignty, protecting their economies from external shocks, and ensuring long-term stability for their people. The BRICS bloc is now building new payment systems, developing digital currencies, and increasing trade in their own currencies to bypass the dollar and strengthen their financial independence. This is a long-term project, filled with significant technical, political, and economic challenges, but the direction is clear and the momentum is building. Ultimately, BRICS aims to create a multipolar financial world, where the dollar is just one of several major currencies and no single nation can dominate the global economy. The journey toward this new order is just beginning, but its outcome could fundamentally redefine how the global economy operates for generations to come. The world is watching closely as BRICS challenges the post-war economic order, raising questions about the future of money, power, and international cooperation. The stakes have never been higher, and the next chapter in global finance is about to be written. One clear sign of de-dollarization is the growing use of local currencies in BRICS trade. This trend is not just a symbolic gesture. It represents a fundamental shift in how these nations approach international commerce and financial cooperation. Previously, trade between members, like Brazil selling soybeans to China, was settled in US dollars, adding costs and risks. Relying on the dollar meant exposure to exchange rate fluctuations and additional transaction fees, making trade more expensive and less predictable for BRICS nations. Now, BRICS countries increasingly trade directly in their own currencies, bypassing the dollar. This allows them to avoid unnecessary conversion costs and gives them greater control over their financial transactions. For example, most Russia-China trade is now in rubles and yuan, a shift accelerated by Western sanctions. This move has not only deepened their economic ties, but also insulated them from external financial pressures. India is promoting the rupee for international settlements, while Brazil and China have set up direct currency trade. These efforts are designed to foster more resilient and independent financial systems within the BRICS bloc. These moves are part of a coordinated strategy to build a new trading architecture. By working together, BRICS nations aim to create a more balanced and equitable global financial system. Trading in local currencies reduces demand for the dollar and weakens the US's exorbitant privilege. This privilege has long allowed the US to borrow cheaply and exert outsized influence over global finance. It also strengthens BRICS financial markets and raises the global profile of their currencies. As these markets grow, they attract more international investment and foster greater economic stability. However, the dollar remains deeply embedded in global finance, and building new systems takes time and trust. The transition is complex, requiring cooperation and technological upgrades. Challenges include currency volatility and the need for robust infrastructure. Ensuring smooth transactions and stable exchange rates is essential for long-term success. Despite these hurdles, BRICS remains committed to a more balanced global order. Their unity and shared vision drive ongoing reforms and innovation. The shift is gradual but deliberate, Each policy change and new agreement brings the bloc closer to its goal. Each step away from the dollar increases BRICS' economic autonomy. This growing independence empowers member nations to shape their own economic destinies. The world's financial architecture is slowly being rewired. New connections and alliances are forming, changing the flow of global capital. The implications for U.S. influence are profound. As the dollar's dominance wanes, so too does America's ability to shape global economic policy. The process is complex, but the momentum is real. Every new agreement and policy signals a step forward in this historic transformation. BRICS is determined to see it through, forging a new path in global finance and setting the stage for a more multipolar world. BRICS isn't just talking about change, they're building it technologically. A key project is BRICS Pay, a new payment system designed to bypass the Western-controlled SWIFT network. BRICS Pay aims to connect domestic payment systems, enabling seamless cross-border transactions without the dollar. This reduces vulnerability to sanctions and cuts transaction costs. Linking systems like China's Union Pay and India's RuPay, BRICS Pay would make trade and travel within the bloc easier. Implementing this system is complex, requiring regulatory and technical coordination. Data security and governance are major concerns. Still, the project is moving forward, signaling BRICS' serious intent. Technological innovation is at the core of their de-dollarization strategy. There was talk of a single BRICS currency, but the idea has been set aside. Instead, BRICS is focusing on using national currencies for trade, a more practical approach. Creating a common currency would require deep integration and loss of sovereignty, which the bloc isn't ready for. The economic differences among members make a single currency risky and potentially destabilizing. The Eurozone's struggles serve as a warning. By promoting local currencies and bilateral swap agreements, BRICS maintains flexibility and control. China, for example, has signed numerous currency swap deals. This decentralized approach strengthens each member's currency and bypasses the dollar. It's a sign of political maturity and realism. The real work of de-dollarization is happening in these practical, incremental steps. The US dollar's dominance is deeply entrenched, making de-dollarization a monumental challenge. The dollar is the world's default for trade, reserves, and commodities, creating a powerful network effect. Its markets are the most liquid and trusted, and central banks see it as a safe haven. Overcoming this trust and infrastructure is a Herculean task. The financial system supporting the dollar has been built over decades. BRICS initiatives like BRICS Pay are still in their infancy compared to the dollar's global reach. Many countries, including BRICS members, hold vast dollar reserves and fear instability. A rapid decline in the dollar could trigger global financial turmoil. Even those seeking alternatives must proceed cautiously. De-dollarization is a delicate, gradual process. BRICS faces internal challenges due to its members' diverse economies and interests. China is a manufacturing giant, Russia and Brazil are commodity exporters, India's economy is service-driven, and South Africa is more developed but slower growing. These differences create conflicting needs. What benefits one may harm another. Political rivalries like India's tensions with China complicate coordination. Some members are wary of simply replacing US dollar dependence with reliance on the yuan. Progress is often slow and requires compromise. The bloc's diversity means a single currency is unlikely. Instead, BRICS promotes all local currencies, a decentralized but less efficient approach. Internal dynamics shape the pace and nature of de-dollarization. The US is closely watching BRICS's de-dollarization efforts, as the dollar's dominance is central to American power. For decades, the dollar has been the world's primary reserve currency, giving the US significant influence over global trade and finance. Washington can use diplomatic and economic pressure to discourage moves away from the dollar. This includes lobbying allies and partners to maintain dollar-based transactions and reinforcing existing financial alliances. The US may leverage institutions like the IMF and World Bank or offer incentives or penalties to BRICS members. These organizations, where the US holds considerable sway, can be used to shape the global financial environment in America's favor. Regulatory actions could make it harder for alternatives like BRICS Pay to connect globally. By tightening rules or imposing new compliance requirements, the US can slow the adoption of rival payment systems. The threat of secondary sanctions deters banks and companies from joining BRICS-led initiatives. Even firms outside the US can face penalties if they participate in non-dollar transactions that Washington opposes. This creates a climate of risk and uncertainty for those moving away from the dollar, making many financial institutions hesitant to embrace alternatives. However, aggressive US responses could backfire, accelerating the search for alternatives. If countries feel threatened, they may double down on efforts to reduce their reliance on the dollar. Sanctions on Russia have already prompted many countries to reconsider their dollar exposure. This has led to a rise in bilateral trade agreements using local currencies and increased interest in alternative payment systems. American policymakers face a dilemma: defend the dollar's supremacy without pushing others away, or undermining trust in the US-led system. BRICS must navigate this complex geopolitical landscape carefully, balancing their ambitions with the realities of US influence. The stakes are high for both sides, as the outcome could redefine the balance of power in global finance for years to come. The outcome will shape the future of global finance, impacting everything from international trade to investment flows. The world is watching this high-stakes contest unfold, aware that the decisions made now could alter the course of economic history. If BRICS succeeds, the global economy could become truly multipolar. The dollar would remain important, but other currencies, like the yuan and euro, would gain influence. This would end the unipolar financial order of recent decades. The US could face higher borrowing costs and reduced power to impose sanctions. Global economic influence would be more widely distributed. Developing countries would have more options and less vulnerability to US monetary policy. Financial crises in the US would have less global impact. A more diversified system could foster greater equity and South-South cooperation. However, the transition could bring instability and competition between currency blocs. The world would need a new safe haven asset. The challenge is not just to challenge the old order, but to build a stable new one. The stakes are global and historic. BRICS's push for de-dollarization marks a historic shift in global finance. By promoting local currencies and building new systems, they're challenging the old order. But the obstacles are immense: dollar dominance, internal divisions, and US resistance. A complete displacement of the dollar is unlikely soon. The more realistic outcome is a gradual move toward a diversified monetary system. Success depends on BRICS's unity, credible institutions, and geopolitical skill. The conversation about global finance has changed, and BRICS is at the center. Their journey will shape the economic story of the 21st century.